Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session
with your host, Michael Rearden.
I've talked about the idea of how our brain develops and how we are a learner in a sense forever. But when we are going to separate it from the two determining factors of if you are a kid or if you're an adult, we have to look at it in a way of how's our brain structuring itself. Because when you're young, your brain is forming developmental years, you're navigating new emotions, and you're living life almost as if it was your first time because it is your first time. You challenge yourself to say, you should get this, you should know this. And sure enough, your brain is just like, hey, we're still building. It's almost like moving into your new house. Let's say you just called the builder. You told the builder, you said, hey, builder, I want you to build a house. And the builder just poured the foundation and you're moving in already. Well, guess what? There's no, walls, there's no roof. And you're wondering, like, what is going on? I called the builder and the builder poured the foundation. Yes, you have the foundation, but you don't have everything else to build the home yet. There's aspects to this when it comes to our brain. It's very similar, where in our younger years, right? There's no age, literally. Like we can say until you're 25, you're still pouring down the foundation because the brain is not fully developed until 25, right? So this is something you have to understand. Well, the brain is not fully developed. We're still pouring down the foundation. We're allowing it to harden and cure, whatever, and say, hey, now we can build, right? But life is not going to always wait until you're 25 to say, okay, now it's time to build, right? Sometimes life is not going to do that. Life is not going to be perfect for you to say, okay, well, I have all this runway to wait. Let me take my time to grow up. Some people have to grow up when they're 9 years old, right? Maybe they're the big sibling and their mom or dad has to go to work and there's no one else to watch, their brothers and sisters, siblings, or whoever. And so they have to show up. So that person essentially has to be the mom or that person has to be the dad in the sense of the parent, the guardian figure for those children. So now they're taking on a level of responsibility that was delegated typically for an adult. So now they're thinking in a different brain pattern. And it's funny because I actually did some work on this when it came to like dealing with people who were first children and then second and third down the road, right? Where that first child typically is for the most part is more responsible. And where I'm just going to say responsible, I found that to be across the board more responsibility in more than, let's say, 80%, right? So there's always going to be some outliers. Now, when you think about being the first child, right, it's almost like you have to protect your siblings, right? You have to protect the people who come after you, right? Well, where is your safety net, right? Who protects you, right? Mom or dad protects you, grandma or grandpa protects you. But what happens if all that is stripped away? And now you have to figure out, well, how do I do this by myself? So our brain now is functioning and developing different than if we naturally had two parents that loved us all the way until we're 25. And now we have the runway to say, okay, now I get to look at what I need to do. Most people don't have that luxury. So today we have to figure out how is our brain structuring itself at different developmental stages and processes so we can say, hey, if this is happening, this is what I need to do. And so I have this article here, Brain Restructuring, the Journey from Adolescence to Adulthood. And basically, this article is talking about the idea of how we are progressing and how the brain goes through all of these changes and making ourselves aware of them. So when we are going through a process, when we're going through this genetic or environmental change, whatever it be first, we get to make better lifestyle choices. Because who would you be if you had everything given to you? Would you be different, right? Or do you need to be that person that had to fight their way to get to something? So you didn't get everything handed to you or whatever. They call it a silver spoon, right? So some people have a silver spoon in their mouth, they say, when they have things like parents give them things. So they have a silver spoon where they have the advantage. And I think this is where they have the conversation of white privilege. It doesn't exist, but it's to say that you have two parents that care and love you. And so you have an advantage. And there is an advantage for certain countries. For example, America, the land of dreams and freedom. People would love to come to America. That's why we had an immigrant crisis, and we still do, coming across because the American dream, the possibilities. America is that land where people can do what they always dreamt they could do, but certain places they kind of, you know, poop on your dreams. So now we have this idea of we can do something in America, right? The land of the free. And I always talk to people, right? And it's so funny, the idea of people in different countries, they say America, the land of the free, the beacon, right? The leaders of the world. Most of the people in America over here are doing TikTok dances and stuff. So you have to wonder, like, hey, are these the leaders you want? And sure enough, it's not, right? But the brain is still developing, right? The brain that it once was is different than what it is today. So for us as adults and parents to say, well, you should be doing what I did because it's the only the right thing. It's the only thing that, made me who I was, because my path and my progress that I was dealing with is, my learning. So I know what is going to be the result if you follow in my footsteps, but they have different footsteps to follow. They're in a different place. There's different technologies. There's different things that weren't there growing up. There's different problems. So of course the mind is going to be different. So the mind is going to restructure itself differently than how we grow or grew up. So that means we just can't live life blanketly, and blanketly meaning cookie cutter, where my life is this and your life needs to be this because it's the same as my life and my life is perfect, or my life has so many good things. And I'm going down the line of, wouldn't you want this too? Well, what does someone truly want in life? Because what do I like? I like pizza. I like Philly cheesesteaks. I don't want a ham and cheese when I want a Philly cheesesteak. I don't want Taco Bell when I want pizza. There's things that you want sometimes, and in life, you're going to want certain things. Maybe you want peace. Maybe you want a family. Maybe you want to travel the world, and your desire is all going to be a determining factor of how you develop. Because if you develop in the sense of having all of these wonderful things in life, you're going to have this ability, this idea of you want to do these things, you're going to do them. But if you grew up poor in a neighborhood, right, your lifestyle is very different. You're with your homies, you're gangbangers, you're selling drugs and dope on the corner. And that's your life, right? You might get some money and, buy some nice clothes and some jewelry and stuff like that. And that is your life. You're not going on vacations and stuff like that. And if you do, you go on a cheap cruise. So, this is not to throw shade at anyone, but this is the reality. Your mind develops differently depending on your upbringing and your current environment. Because if you grew up in a safe, nurturing environment, your mind and your brain is going to be very different than if you grew up in struggle and hardship. That's just what it is. I know Mike Tyson talked about it with his son. His son says, Dad, I want to be a boxer. Mike says, you can't be a boxer. You don't have what it takes. You went to private schools. And, Mike started laughing, about it. But that's the reality is you didn't grow up in the hardship. So how can you fight for something that you don't even know you never had? Right? Because everything was given to you, the silver spoon aspect. The brain structures itself depending on your environment. Some environments are going to be really good for brains and some are not going to be good. But today is not so much about only focusing on one or the other. It's about understanding that if the brain is going to be focusing on different environments and different patterns and ideals, essentially, we should know what needs to be done in order for that brain to develop in a good way. So there's this idea from transitioning the mind from adolescent to adult, right? When does that happen, right? I like to ask teens this question. When are you an adult, right? Like when you're 18, you can go to jail instead of juvie. Can you smoke at 18, right? You can smoke, but you can't buy a drink until you're 21. So are you an adult at 21 or are you an adult at 18? You can go off to the military at 18 without the parents' consent, but at 16, you can go to the military if your parents sign you away. When are you an adult? One of the questions I ask them, because they don't know. No one knows, essentially, right? We can say that you're an adult at 21, right? You're tried as an adult, right? We can look at the politics and the system that have been enacted here in America. The idea is Their brain is not fully developed until they're 25. So they are not even a fully developed being yet. You can think of a baby in the womb, a fetus, right? Is that a baby, right? There's so much conversation about this, that the baby is not alive until the baby is born. And even on the birth certificate, I just had to get a birth certificate for our new baby. It says the baby is born alive on this day, right? And it has to go through the doctors, and the doctor has to sign that the baby's born alive on this day, not that the baby was alive, right? Born meaning that they had to go through either a cesarean section or, a vaginal birth, right? It's crazy how they have to change terminology just so they can appease what a birth is or what a life is. If you have a heartbeat, if you have a brain, wave pattern, are you alive? Right? The people who are in vegetative states and, in the hospitals and they can't move, they're comatose, are they alive? Depending on, your state or your country, that person's alive. But yet many people, they live life comatose. They live life not even going after any meaning. They're better off being in bed doing nothing, because in their days they do nothing. They accomplish nothing. And I know this sounds harsh, and it needs to sound harsh because we need to wake up. So there's things that we have to do to help the brain make some changes. Now, there's so much going on in our life. There's so many emotions that a person can feel. There's so many things a person can feel. You could be high, you could be cold, you could be sad, you could be hungry, you could be angry, you could be full, you could be delighted, you could be furious. And I know some of them are going to be synonyms and similar. But when it comes to our emotional state, there's always going to be some level of instability. So what we have to do is we have to give our emotional state the ability to be constant. Now, constant doesn't mean that we don't feel an emotion. It just means we understand how to navigate the emotion. It's a big difference. Some people feel an emotion. That, this is from my Latin girls and stuff. They will say, "Oh, I'm feeling this, and I'm so passionate, and I'm going to yell, and I'm going to scream, and I'm going to throw dishes." And is that person really regulated? Is that person really someone who can say, "Hey, I'm upset. Let's talk about it," right? Can I communicate? And sometimes the brain can do that, but sometimes the brain can't do that. Let's look at adolescence. If a child is having a tantrum, there's a disconnect in them having a conversation and being able to communicate with you fully. They're screaming, they're yelling. How in the world are you going to tell them what to do when they're not even listening, right? Their emotion is so powerful and so strong that they are not even thinking anymore. We can think of now, fast forward to an adult, and at some point in their life where something happens where they become so angry, and in a fit of rage, they do something. And then after they get arrested, they tell the cops, like, "I don't even know what happened." It's like they blacked out. Emotions can be something that block our reception to if we are focusing on the right things and doing the right things, or if we're doing the wrong things. So we have to be able to become clear on our emotional state, and we have to have the ability to control it. That's going to be a sure tell sign that you are on the right path to being a full-fledged adult. Now, there's some adults that are big babies and they can't control their emotions. Yeah, sure, right? Are they an adult yet? We can say they're big babies or whatever, right? But the idea is the brain is going to be structuring itself according to what you're giving it. If you're giving it something good, if you're giving it focus, if you're giving it attention, on saying, "This is no good, this is better, I should do this." Because if you go to a job interview and you don't get the job, are you going to punch the person in the face that didn't give you the job? No, right? That doesn't make any sense. You say, "Okay, thank you." All right. You might even ask, "Well, what will be some recommendations so you can make some enhancements and you can do better on your next job interview," right? That would be the most logical thing as an adult, right? Some adults, they will say, "Oh, I'm going to go drink. I'm going to go do this." And before you know it, they're doing the same thing again, right? They're repeating the negative process, right? So again, depending on where your brain is, sometimes you have to mature, right? I know when I was young, for example, right? When I was doing my first jobs and things like that, the mature brain did better than the egotistic brain or the immature brain aspect of, me being a young teen, right? 18, 19, I thought I knew everything, but then again, I didn't. right? You have to humble yourself in a sense. So this leads to the next aspect, identity exploration. So the search for self, and basically we are trying to figure out, is this certain or is this not certain, right? Am I this person or am I not this person? Now, your identity is going to be built on your character, your upbringing, again, your environment. If you have a parent who's always yelling and screaming at you and belittle and berating you, you're going to have some stuff going on in your mind. I'm not saying that you're broken, but I'm saying is that it would be easier if a parent just raised children to not be broken than for them later on as adults to repair what was broken as children. So parents have an obligation almost in a sense to make sure their child gets the best life possible. What is best, of course, is going to be situational. It's going to be dependent on you, your personal idea, because of, there's certain cultures who say a perfect life is I'm going to pick your spouse for you. And maybe that's not what you want as a perfect life. So you need to identify your identity. If your identity is confused, you're a male and then now all of a sudden you're a female, this is a confusion in your identity. Now, I'm not saying that you can't love who you want to love. That's a different conversation. I believe you can love whoever you want to love. But when you are confusing your identity with who you are, with who you think you need to be because the world is telling you that, that is a confusion and your brain is not functioning correctly. So you need to restructure your brain to say, hey, if I want to think this way, that's fine, but let me be realistic about it. All right. I have a mental illness. I have a mental disorder. And if you have pronouns by your name, you are a person who is confused about your identity still. I understand sometimes it happens automatically on certain websites like LinkedIn, for example. I found I had he and him by my name. I'm like, wait, who even put this here? It wasn't me. It wasn't any of the people who work for me. So it was automatic that they did that. But yet people don't even realize that it's there. So I took it down and sure enough, it doesn't matter. I know who I am. Do you know who you are? Right? The identity has to be that strong. I know who I am. Do you know who you are? Now we get into the decision making and the struggles behind it. Because if you think about it, as an adult, you can go to the grocery store and you can buy a whole cake. You can buy a bunch of cookies. You can go buy alcohol and you can go eat all this stuff and drink all this stuff. And you can say, oh, feels good right now, right? For 90 minutes or whatever it is. Reality is you don't, or I hope you don't. As a kid, or I remember being a kid, I can't wait to be an adult and I can have all the ice cream and all the cake and all the candies that I want. And then you get some cavities and you're like, well, these cavities hurt. And you got to get a root canal. You're like, whoa, this root canal is no joke. And then you start to mature, right? I don't want all this candy. I want to focus on my health. I want to do the right thing. I want to go to the gym. I don't want to stay inside and just be in bed all day. Like, what is the fun in that? So I'm making the decision to be more active. I'm making the decision to be more health conscious. I'm making the decision to be happy or to be more present in my family. This is all something that people struggle with. They struggle with, what do they do? It's a choice. When you wake up in the morning, whether it be because of an alarm or natural, what is the first thing you do? Do you get up and go to the bathroom and brush your teeth or go on your phone? Do you eat a good breakfast or do you get something fast? Do you go to work and say, I can't wait till I go home? Do you go to work and say that you can't wait to go home? There's just so many different things that go on. And I encourage people to figure out, like, what is it that you truly want? Because it's easy for someone to say, hey, I'm making this choice, but the choice wasn't truly defined by you. It was influenced by your environment. Because you can hang around gangbangers and drug dealers and stuff like that, and they're saying you need this and you need that, and you're like, I guess I need that. Versus you look at something better, grandiose, a mentor or a coach, whatever, and you say, you know what, this is possible? I didn't know that was possible. Most young adults don't know what is possible besides what they have seen. So they see their teachers, they see their parents, they see their friends. Oftentimes when it comes to their dreams and you're saying, what would you like? Oh, I want $1 million. I want a big house. I want friends and admiration or whatever it be. Well, sure enough, I always kind of throw in something. I was like, let me give you something better. When do you want this instead of that? And they go, yeah, I want that instead of what I wanted before. So what is it? Was your dream not adequate enough? Or did you not realize that you can dream something greater than what you were told or what you saw? Because often when it comes to our dreams and our aspirations, it's what we think and what we see is attainable. So we say we want to do something, and oftentimes it might be safe. The decision to do something safe or to do something risky is entirely up to you. What is your risk tolerance? We need to look at that. What does your brain structuring tell you about that? Did you grow up in a risky environment or did you grow up in a safe environment? Did you grow up in an environment where they say to save your money and to be frugal? Or did they say, hey, use your money and create debt and use good debt in order to build a meaningful life, like buying homes and renting out those homes? Think of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and what he does. There's a very different idea of having a rich dad who is a construction worker and he's making millions of dollars, or a college educated father who goes to school and does what he was told to do and he's continually living in the rat race. I mean, you get to make the choice. And most people, when they are reading that book and they're trying to figure out what they do next in life, it is something that they have to say, you know what? This is a decision that I made unconsciously. And oftentimes that is what it is. They made an unconscious decision because they just kind of went through with how things have gone. Then we have our last bit, and it's probably our biggest bit here in America and where we struggled the most, is our peer influence. Now, peer influence is not only talking about teens and their peers around them, right? So they're smoking, they're doing all the wrong things. And maybe when you graduate, and you're hanging around your college mates or your coworkers and you're doing everything that they're all doing. This is more than just your peer relationships. This is a cultural thing, because when you're in an environment, you are going to adapt to that environment. You are going to relinquish the idea that there can be a different environment for yourself. And oftentimes when people come for career coaching, it's because they finally realize that the environment that they are currently in is not exactly what they are enthralled about every single day. So they want to make a change. And rightfully so, you can make the change. But why did you not do the work in the beginning to make sure that what you chose is the best thing, right? And oftentimes it's because our brain is still developing. Even me, right? When I was young, I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I finally hit high school and said, let me do business. And then I said, let me do teaching and education. And this is what my passion is. This is what I do. What would have happened if I said I wanted to be a teacher when I was in elementary school? Would things have been different? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that my path led me to where I needed to be. And maybe your path is leading you to where you need to be, but it's a very roundabout way of doing it. And I love working with young adults and teens to kind of get rid of all of that trial and error so we can just go into what we want to do. And then I even give them the idea of there's going to be different stages that they're going to be going in, because that is what life, that is how the brain develops. It's going to be in different times and different stages. So you might want to be a lawyer. How long do you want to be a lawyer? You want to be a lawyer for 10 years? Then you want to have a family and then you want to maybe retire? Sure, we can do that, right? But we give the brain the process. We are structuring our brain for that. So if we are not doing the things and we're just allowing life to happen, of course our brain is going to be all messed up when we're an adult. It's because we did not give ourselves much focus. And in this article here, Brain Restructuring, the Journey from Adolescence to Adulthood, I make it so crystal clear of how the brain is coming up and how the brain is learning and how you can utilize this for your benefit. Now, this doesn't matter if you are a child, a teenager, an adult, a person with problems. You can figure out what strategies you need to support brain development at any stage in any process. Because even if you had a hard time growing up, right? Maybe your brain didn't develop exactly how we have written here. Sure enough, you can begin to implement those changes today, right? Number one, foster positive habits. We do that on the podcast. We can do that in our life, right? Two, we cultivate lifelong learning. We pick up books. We listen to podcasts. We dare to learn. Not, we just kind of learn as we progress. No. We cultivate lifelong learning. We're not one of those individuals that say that education ends at a certain age. When we're 18, we're done with school. Or when we, pick up a job, we're done. We learned everything that we needed to know. There's always going to be the aspect that we can learn, we can do more than what we are right now. Okay. Then we get into something like 3. We are practicing our emotional regulations. We understand that we have a great capacity to, for anger, but then we also have a great capacity for love and kindness and nurturing. So we can utilize both. And I'm not saying that you always need to be kissing everyone, and I'm also not saying you need to be punching everyone. So we figure out what is going to be our emotional state where we find the homeostasis where we would like to be. And then we create that. And then we are going to be supporting healthy connections. Those are the people that we have around us. You're not going to have negative people around you, I hope, or fixed-minded people around you, I hope, constantly. You're not going to have people who are telling you to do the wrong things constantly. You're going to have people who support you, people who want to see you win, I hope, right? Because if they don't want to see you win, if they just want to use you as a stepping stone, it's probably a safe bet that you can get rid of these individuals. Now, in the adolescence time, you don't care about this as much. It doesn't matter if they are stepping on you or not. It doesn't matter if they're using you for some type of benefit or gain or popularity. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if I can get even something, a fraction of something, I'm around this popular kid. It doesn't matter if I have to buy them lunch. It doesn't matter if I have to do their homework. I'm getting something from it. All right. So it's almost like, like a give and take, but oftentimes what you get is not appropriate to what you're giving. So I encourage, teens to do the work and to make sure that what you are willing to give is less than what you're willing to get out of things. So that means if you have to give so much to be in a relationship and you're not getting anything back, it's not a good relationship. It should be mutual, where it's like, okay, it's a give and take type of thing where I'm giving you and you're giving the same thing back. We have a balance in our emotional bank account where I'm not bringing you down or you're not bringing me down. We're uplifting each other. You're uplifting me. And I'm not saying that you have to have this, right? Like this is mandatory, but it's a good thing to implement. If you can do that properly, you're going to be in a better place developmentally as your brain develops. You're going to be more mature. Now, it's still going to take some time, of course, but you're going to go through the processes. And then if you give yourself coaches and mentors on top of it, you have the mixture for something great. And this is number 5. We seek guidance. We're not afraid to ask for help. We're not afraid to say, you know what, if I'm not doing something that needs to be done, who's going to be the person that tells me? Because if mom or dad tells me, Mom, Dad, like, why are you telling me to live my life, right? Because there's things that mom can do and there's things that dad can do and there's things that mom can't do and things that dad can't do. And as much as you want to be that everything for them, you have to give them coaches, you have to give them mentors, you have to give them people that can be their outlets that truly care about them. And it's a difficult thing to allow another person to do the job where you feel as if you are the most qualified for. And you have seen them develop. You have seen their brain function. You've seen their brain not function when they were hanging out with their friends, smoking marijuana in the car, and the police call you at 2 a.m. saying, hey, you need to come get your kid. Maybe not at that time. But again, their brain is still structuring. Their brain is still developing. And we have to understand maybe at some point we did the same thing. It's just that we didn't get called. So we have to understand that the brain is going to be developing in so many different facets and so many different ways. Brain restructuring, this blog right here, the journey from adolescence to adulthood once more. Check out the link in the description box below. You can read this at your leisure. You can give it to someone who might be going through the teenage years. You can give it to someone who's a young adult, or you can give it to an adult who might not have got their S word together. Rightfully so, right? There's no right or wrong way to live life. There's no law that says you have to drive at 16. You have the ability to drive at 16, and you don't have to own a house if you don't want to own a house, right? You get to make that choice. You don't have to have hundreds of friends. You can have just fun, 2 or 5, whatever it be. You get to determine what you want. You get to figure out what your brain loves, right? Because the brain loves certain things, right? Now, I'm not talking about the bad things like drugs and alcohols and sugars and sweets and stuff like that. I'm talking about the good things where it loves to be nurtured. It loves to be cared. It loves to be appreciated. It loves to be happy, right? Those things are natural components of life if you allow life to happen. Not to you, you happen to life. And all those things are natural components of being human. So we just have to realize that as our brain is going, we are just becoming more human. We are able to feel more. We're able to understand different things from our past failures and our successes and just being alive for so long. The wisdom of age can be something that teaches us things that maybe a book will never tell us or a podcast will never tell us, because sometimes there's things that we have to learn firsthand. Where it's like, well, I want to learn how to ride a bike. You read a book, you can watch people all day, but not until you do it do you realize that, wow, there's things that I have to work on. My core strength, my balance, my mindset, everything. It doesn't matter if it's a bike. It doesn't matter if it's a diet. It doesn't matter if it's a career. All of these things sometimes have to be experienced by us. Our brain has to get used to it. They say that if you give a 18-year-old $20,000, in a year or two, they're not going to have $20,000. Now, this is not to say every 18-year-old is going to splurge the money, but the majority of them will, right? Because they have not learned financial literacy. Maybe they have not learned how to, emotionally regulate with all this new wealth that they have stumbled upon. It's only a matter of time before they lose it all. Or maybe they are able to be one of those, 10% of people who can say, I'm going to use this money to enhance my current situation, to get more money. And, it's a rare commodity because oftentimes they lose it, but then they make it back. So we learn from our lessons, and it's because our brain is still developing, our brain is still structuring. And in a sense, it's learning how to undo being a kid and start being an adult. But then again, sometimes, having that mindset of a kid and having that heart of youth is a powerful thing for an adult. So there is a balance. You have to be able to strike that for yourself. You need to figure it out for yourself. You go into a candy store, there's so many candies. And I'm not saying you need to go to candy stores, but this is just the analogy. The analogy is you can get candies you like or you can get candies you don't like. People don't like licorice, the black licorice type candy, because it's bitter, right? It's not so sweet. People want sweet candy typically. So they might go for the red licorice. They might go for, something sour for a different flair. But the idea is they get to choose. And in life, you get to choose too. So if your brain was not structured correctly growing up, therapy, of course, people, they go to therapists, look at their childhood traumas. They might come to me, their mindset, and look at, what they would like to have and putting together from all the things they didn't have to what they have to get to figure out what they need to do. So figure out what you need to do in order to enhance your life today. Because from adolescence to adults, there's going to be many hiccups and pitfalls along the way. But it doesn't mean that we cannot one day become the adult that we would like to see in the world. It just begins with an understanding that our brain is developing at all stages of life. So understanding how our brain has formed or maybe should have formed, we can restructure it to the brain that we need to live the life that we would love to live today.